Hi, everybody. Welcome to the new normal. I'm your host, Lisa Davis, aka Litecoin Lisa, and today we have my friend Skullcap Savant here to talk a little bit about V-Steg. We've had him on before, and a lot of you guys thought it was really interesting. He and I chat with another friend and see things all the time that we see. I see a lot of Z, he sees a lot of V, and we think it's kind of a messaging or spell casting that might be going on, and we want to know what you guys think about it. So make a comment or two, let us know what you think if you're in the live chat, and I'll be right back with Skullcap Savant right after this. Give us a like and share the video. Welcome back, Ben. Good to have you.
Hi, everybody.
I was kind of telling everybody just a little quick intro that what V-Steg is, that it's kind of like a messaging or spell casting, I guess, was kind of my little short version. Can you give everybody kind of a little more well-explained version of that?
Yeah, sure. So hello all. It's great to be back on Lisa's channel. Hopefully we can do this more consistently, so we don't have to go over the tenets of steganography every time I come on. But yeah, I am Ben. I'm the Skullcap Savant. I came across through pattern recognition a glyph that was used in the same way across all forms of media, and it's just a simple character in the alphabet, and it's the letter V. And I found a way to explain the instance of the pattern through an ancient technique of casting called steganography. And it's part, yes, like you said, kind of a spell casting system is what I can probably infer it to people in the modern sense to mean more like a remote viewing spell casting, because it uses kind of the same psychic technology to ingrain thought patterning on the populace. And instead of, it being a specific device or something that, people usually envision the MK Ultra programs, or even they'll go back and they'll look at movies like Clockwork Orange, or they'll take a look at some of the CIA experiments that were done with LSD and the Charles Manson experiments. There's all sorts of ethos around mind control, but the delivery of it, outside of people thinking about a frequency set, like I'm gonna point a gun that's gonna shoot frequency at you, and it's gonna contort your brain waves, and you're gonna be under my spell, right? We see that kind of thing in the movies. And so it's in the consciousness of the population to kind of understand it this way. But the way that I've come to understand how the spell casting and the mind control works, it's a very subtle language and mind manipulation through consistent subliminal messaging that's put right in front of you. And the subliminal messaging includes, if it's a mind control spell, almost every time an instance of V, and V can be transposed. This is the nature of spell casting. V is the 22nd letter of the alphabet. So when you see 22 over and over and over again, like the book Catch 22, which is basically a very V-Steg heavy book, you have these instances of inferred mind control. Or you go to an author whose name is Thomas Pynchon, and you read his books. One's called Gravity's Rainbow, which has a lot of steganography that leads to mind control, and then connects a lot of concepts together that this audience might understand, with the Road to Ruta and the Rainbow and Oz. Oz is simply a tale that elaborates on mind control and how it's an allegory for mind control and manipulating time. So it's important.
V is also the Roman numeral 5.
So the Roman numeral 5.
Which is also what you talk about, that being man or human.
The number of man is 5.
The number of man.
We have 5 appendages. Life is the angular geometry of life is the pentagram. That's why it's used so often. So the pentagram as an angular marker for various aspects, the 72 degrees, the 108 degrees, and the 36 degrees that are cast into the pentagram that make up the complete dynamic. That the phi ratio is also included in there also, but that's not an angle, so we're not going to go there. But these things are all wrapped up in the V-Steg spell casting system, and we have to do probably a proper show where I can prepare the material, get a presentation, walk people through this stuff, because the language that I even can use to dumb it down is it's not simple. It's not a simple concept, but when you see the pattern and you learn the pattern, it becomes second nature, and it becomes quite a bit of fun to look at how it's used. So we've been going through quite a bit of the V-Steg, even just since the Trump assassination, with the V that was blasted across his face,
the
blood spatter. That's an example of V-Steg, and there's something to the assassination that you're not looking at deeply enough. Or the V for Vendetta story. The V for Vendetta story in November 5th, and the story of November 5th, and remember the 5th of November, and that we are going into the November 5th elections this year. These are all indicators that there's something in your realm of consciousness that is being manipulated by some other authority that has a know-how on how to use this stuff. And when the markers come up, you tend to recognize them and draw conclusions. So I don't know why my camera's gone blurry all of a sudden, but it's highlighting my bookshelf more than it's highlighting me now. There it is. There we go.
Readjust.
Yeah. So anyway, we could start there too. I don't know how many people, if you wanted to talk about that today, we could talk about some aspects of the V-Steg and speculate on who casts these spells. Do
you believe it's a good guy effort? Or do you believe it's a good guy effort or a bad guy effort? Is it just a tool that both sides use?
Yeah, it's like a hammer or a sword, like I think this self-organizing collective that everybody in this community talks about, I identify them as Cathar Templars, and I have reasons for thinking that. I don't know if we're going to get to that today, but let's just say that because the glyph can be used to cast mind control on someone, I have long speculated since finding it that it can also be used to make somebody aware of it and break that spell. And I think that's how I came across it, because I started to come across it. I was like, why is it cast here in this certain way and here in this other certain way? And I started to realize that there may be 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 more factions. They're all using it for their own means. Some are trying to put people into subversion. Some people are trying to make other people more aware. And it's a subversive war, I think, that's going on between factions, and we are the pawns in the game. Our minds are the pawns in the game, in other words.
We're like the NPCs without knowing it.
So maybe we can talk about that, though. V for Vendetta is a good primer to give people as a story. First of all, you can actually recognize quite a bit of V-Steg just in the November 5th, because it's the 5th day of the month. And 11 times 5 is 55, 5 by 5 with the Q stuff. For instance, you see all the confirmation. And so you guys see how all this stuff can be manipulated with numerology, gematria. These are all, gematria is the casting of numbers and letters into a combinatory effect. Numerology is just the numerological component of that, right? Steganography is using ideological concepts in a way that that kind of takes communication and occludes it, right? Like we're talking about, like codifies it. And it's interesting because I actually got a copy of the Steganographia. Trithemius wrote the Steganographia. I'm not going to get it out because we'll get too deep into it. But what's crazy about the Steganographia is the Steganographia is a book that elaborates on different frequencies that you can use in a mind system to channel different Elohim. All of the archangels are listed out. All of them with the suffixes of on and el, and they all have different what look like almost what I can't quite interpret out of the book in plain English, but they look like contact addresses, right? You know, like I've got an IP address and I'm going to route myself over to you to make a phone call, and that IP address goes through this, you know, the video call software we have here, and it defrags in the background. Right. And, you know, I don't even know fully how it all works.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. That's, I don't know why I would be so surprised.
So
we are all energy and frequency.
Yeah. I mean, I have more research to do on this, but the thing only got retranslated into English for the first time last month. So it's a brand new book that I haven't had much time with it, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to find in it, because I actually thought it might have been like an instruction manual about how the casting works. And it is somewhat. You can derive some of that from it. I've gotten more functional understanding about this system from it, but it does look like it's got the Elohim influence on it. So it may be more ancient than what we even are able to realize here, but that's the weirdness to it.
Very interesting.
But November 5th, right? So November 5th. Do you know the first instance of the November 5th? You know, the gunpowder plot? Everybody knows at least the movie from V for Vendetta, right? Or what happened. So Guy Fawkes, F-A-W-K-E-S, was a Jesuit who was caught red-handed trying to blow up Parliament in 1605. And he put a bunch of gunpowder barrels under the Parliament, as they say, and was caught with 7 other assailants, and they were thrown in jail. And they were executed, and everybody was like, in England after this happened, they celebrated. They said, "Wow, we caught him. We thwarted the plot." And Guy Fawkes, as it turns out, may have just been a scapegoat for the whole thing, because there's actually a book people can look up. It's called The Rulers of Evil. And the book is by a guy named, is it Frederick or Francis? I think it's Francis Tupper Saucy. So Francis Tupper Saucy wrote a book called Rulers of Evil, where he kind of investigated this. And the book actually starts out with him having a beef with government because he's in court getting his ass chewed out for taxes not paid.
Imagine that.
Yeah, it's pretty. So he takes it personal. He almost like takes a Cliff High approach to the court system and says, I'm gonna get you fuckers, right? And so he goes, he starts to look into some pattern recognition of his own, and he starts to see that our court system here in the United States and a lot of our body politic are these guys that identify as Jesuits. And they're trained Jesuits. They've gone to Jesuit colleges, and they have a lot of representation, oddly enough, across all things, right? A lot of them are Jews. A lot of them are Catholics, but they're all Jesuits. And so he goes and he in the first part of the book, he points out this in court to the people who are prosecuting him. And he's very crafty with his words, and he ends up kind of getting them into a pickle because they have to strike things into the court record in order to discuss them, and they don't really want to discuss them, and so he's representing himself, just like just like Cliffwood, right? But he's actually going to the hearings, and he's talking about it in court. Well, he ends up legally justifying why he doesn't need to do any of the shit that they're telling him to do. And he gets out of it because the argument stands, because he gets the judge, if I remember incorrectly in the details, it's been a few years since I read the book last, but he gets the court into a I guess a catch-22 where they have to let him off the hook even they don't want to, because if they don't do it, then their whole house of cards and this contract law system that they've built may have, we may have a precedent that, they're thinking where people can point to. So he gets out of it, but the Jesuits are pretty pissed at him, and he has to go on the run. They're sending people after him, and because he's starting to write about this. And he's starting to write about his experiences in finding out the court system. I think the book was written in 1999, if I'm not mistaken, too. So this is a little while ago. He's not with us anymore. He's gone. Francis Tupper Saucy, that is. But what he found out, the rest of the book, after his little personal anecdote that gets you into like, oh shit, like who are the Jesuits? He investigates the Jesuits. He investigates Ignatius Loyola, the person who founded them. It's all Jewish, Khazarian rooted stuff, right? I mean, this is how the Jews infiltrated the Christian church to the extent that they did, to bastardize it also, was the Jesuits. They invented a Kabbalistic order to install themselves into the Catholic Church. They have their own pope. They call him the Black Pope, or the Superior General of the Jesuit army. So and right now, apparently that is Pope Francis. Pope Francis is the first pope of all time that's been the public-facing pope and the black pope, as I understand it. And that's why he's the last pope, because there's this changeover that we very obviously are all going into. But he was writing about this back then. He starts to talk about the structure of it, how they were even instrumental in fucking with the founding fathers. When they came over here, the Jesuit hand was right behind trying to manipulate, because they've been around since like 1510. Pretty much like Spanish Inquisition and Jesuits go hand in hand, right? Like they're the ones that are dictating a lot of the malfeasance that you see in that age. But more than that, you have a whole system of this secret puppeteering of events, of vastly influencing from a lobbying basis. They're like the first secret lobbyists out there to get world affairs kind of into their purview. And he goes out and he names all the people all the way through history. And of course, since they're founded in the early 1500s, 1605 rolls around. By the time 1605 gets there, the story, basically Jews, they've been kicked out of 109 countries. The last one was Hitler's Germany, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they were being kicked out of countries back then too. They were still in the hundreds of countries they'd been kicked out of, but then their name stealing Khazarian ways, they always had to reinvent themselves, right? Well, they reinvented themselves as the Jesuits. That worked for a while. But the people of England, by 1605, they were highly suspicious. They didn't want Jews or Jesuits in the country. And they kept them at bay. There were laws against having them employed by you. It was crazy. I mean, the English really, really didn't like these guys. These were the subversive guys. They ruined our system, right? So along comes November 5th, Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes and 7 other Jesuits are caught by the court system, and they're put to death. Everybody rejoices. The whole country is cheering this on, and this is where the art of war comes into play as their kind of playbook. Mm-hmm. They're very good at spying. They're very good at conniving their way into systems to manipulate them, as we know. If Jesuits have a Khazarian name stealing root, of course people in this community should probably know that. But they get to the point where everybody's so jubilant that they have this huge event where they arrest them. They let their guards down. They think, oh wow, we got the Jesuits. They wouldn't dare bother infiltrating us anymore. But that is exactly what they wanted them to think. For the entire rest of the next 50 years, Jesuits infiltrated England hard because no one was looking for them. They were all playing off the high of having caught them in 1605, 8 of them, right? 8 scapegoat Jesuits, including Guy Fawkes, that they just let their guard down. And the Jesuits infiltrated the hell out of England. They got up to the royalty. They got their tendrils on everything. And that's all she wrote, right? So one of the main morals of this story in this November 5th marker that we're going through, and why one of the key reasons why the steganography elaborates so much on it this year with Trump and the election and the stealing of the election and all these things, very, very, very reminiscent of Jesuit ways to try and install somebody into the presidency, to do it on November 5th, right? The lauded day where the Jesuits did it once already in England, and everybody let their guard down. It's kind of like a lesson for populations in general to not let that cycle repeat, right? Everybody knows that cycle of rough times create strong men, strong men create weak times, weak times. That's a bullshit cycle is what this kind of teaches. We always need to maintain a heightened awareness of this might be a shitty time if I don't do XYZ. And then I need to teach that to my kids. And then they need to teach that to their kids. This constant, cycle of up and down is kind of the dangerous part of the danger of getting infiltrated by Kabbalists, Khazarians. Just a sec, I spilled water. Just a sec.
No problem. I'm curious what I want to ask him about upcoming 9/11 days, if there's any V-Steg around 9/11 days. Oh, he can't hear. He may be able to hear me. I can't hear him. Hold on. Now you've seen the skull cap without the skull cap. So he does have hair. We know this now. I don't think I've ever seen him without his skull cap on. Very interesting around all the stuff leading up to the November 5th. So I'm curious if before, I know we're talking about the November 5th, but I've seen a heightened, it seems like this year, we're just into the beginning of September, and I've seen a heightened talk and attention around 9/11 this year, more than this year, more than ever. And I wonder if there's any V-Steg around the 9/11 date and the
well, insofar as that it connects with Bix's work, there's a ton of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz is this tale that teaches us of the ulterior reality. And in that ulterior reality, the main thing that's being manipulated about the mind is time. And time is really at the heart of what the Jesuits and the name stealers and these Khazarians have been doing over the course of time to hide their actions. Because, everybody always says that it's kind of a colloquialism. He who can, because I think it was George Orwell. I think it was George Orwell who says it. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. So you have the manipulation of history, which is really manipulating time. You're manipulating timelines. You're manipulating the perception of time. What's that?
Did you see the Christmas? There's a new Mandela effect thing about Bing Crosby. You can plan on me instead of you can count on me. I'll be home for Christmas. You can.
No, I haven't seen it.
That song, I'll be home for Christmas. You can count on me. They're now saying you can plan on me. And these old women are getting on and getting like violent on their TikToks and stuff. And like, no,
What?
it's always, you can count on me, not you can plan on me. You're not going
Oh,
to make me pretend that I've remembered this wrong all these years. And I think it's a timeline hop to try
well,
to mess with people.
there's the thing. I do contend that it's not all just glyphs and mind control. I think CERN and the Mandela effect,
Yes.
the
It's to make us a little unsure or off or
yeah,
jack with our, if you're always just a little off balance, you're easier to control, manipulate, all of that.
yeah,
And I think that's also this daylight savings time thing is to keep us off
true. I
um,
think so.
a
I
little
mean,
more.
everything to do with that subtlety, right? The subtlety of time, and even we're starting to get into time as a substance, right? Like Nikolai Kozyrev's work. Can you put time out of phase by just a millisecond? This is kind of like what the Philadelphia experiments and the
Mhm.
Montauk projects were investigating is how do you maybe control time? You can't really control it, but you can harness it and affect it. And it's like if anybody's ever read the Dune novels, or even the movie. Now the movie's out, so people can just go watch the movie. But
Mhm.
in the novels, they have this vibration technology where they create shields and stuff on their arms, and it's impenetrable to blades. And what's happening is, as they describe the technology in the books, it's like a plasma that's activated at a different time signature than you are by just like a millisecond. So it is in just an out of phase version of reality than you are. And so the material object can't breach it, right? It's kind of like a force field. One example in a sci-fi novel of how time may or may not be manipulated, right? I've always
Because it's striking a different time than when you
right.
exist.
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, if you really want to get really crazy, what my theory is and what the V-Steg really is indicative of down here
Mhm.
is technology that people probably aren't ready to come to terms with, if true. In my researches with this stuff, what it points to is the possibility, the strong possibility, and there's also there's a probability that my conclusions are correct about this, in that Saturn itself is a broadcast mechanism, the rings.
Mm.
People have heard about the ring makers of Saturn book. Norman Berggren, who was a NASA scientist in the 80s, died. He was in his 90s. He was in NASA ever since its inception, though, and he was instrumental on the Voyager program. And both Voyagers had specific routes that went past Saturn. V-Steg in the names, the Voyagers. That's one of the things you can always look at, the proper nouns. It's one of those things that I don't know why it's not. Well, it's not apparent to people because they're not looking at it. But even like let's say Bix Weir. So look at his Vincent Viola of Virtu Financial.
He does talk about
Right?
him all the time. Yeah.
Right, but it's V. I mean, he's part of the whole Road to Ruta thing, and the V-Steg points to the manipulation itself happening.
Ah.
Right, so it's an artifact of him being involved, probably. Well, when you go look at Saturn, go back to that, and you go look at the Voyagers and Norman Berggren, who wrote this book, The Ring Makers of Saturn. The reason he called it The Ring Makers of Saturn is because the program was trying to determine what the rings were. Because back in the 70s, when they launched the Voyager, the rings were not complete. They were terminated. There were only so many. They were still building the outer ring. If you went and looked at Saturn in the 70s, there was a big chunk of the rings that weren't there. There was a big
Really?
gap. Mm-hmm. Like, think about like a pizza slice taken out.
Yeah.
There's a big section that's not there. And so, they were like, okay, what the hell? So they sent the Voyager out there and they photographed the crap out of the rings. And what they determined was that there are these gigantic vehicles that are creating plasma trails around the planet itself and leaving in their wake these rings. And they also saw that it had appeared that they were crafting big spherical, spheroid, rock-like objects and spitting them out. Almost like if you're going to make a cement mixture, right? You put a bunch of sediment and stuff in there, and then you got to mix around water, and then it becomes this solid. I speculate somehow maybe these ships, these vehicles, as they call them, they didn't call them ships, they call them vehicles in the Ringmakers of Saturn book, but they're spitting out the remnants of the sediment that they're collecting, and they're making little moons. And so when you go look at everything that's being detailed here, and the book actually shows all the illustrations that they found out. They showed where the missing part of the ring is. The ring is complete now. Saturn has complete rings around it. But when you actually go and look at why NASA told NERM, I mean, it was secret classified information. He just didn't give a shit about bringing it out anymore because he was 96 and he was dying. But when they, you can see why it was kept under wraps. And this is in the wake of everything that they're wondering with about the moon. And I'm of the mind that we at least went to the moon with probes. And they probably saw some shit up in the moon that, they either stayed away or that we went to the moon and it was no man's land, get the hell out, right? And so when you think about some things that couple these stories together, not to get too far out there with people, we can do investigative research on any one of these topics if we want to. But when you start to couple things together with that, Saturn, the rings, the anomaly of the moon, the fact that it looks like when you inspect the moon, it appears to be the same in the same variety of moon that Saturn has. In fact, there's a hallmark of these objects, these spheroid objects that are coming out of these vehicles around Saturn, and they've got these little pucker marks on the back of them. Let me see if I'll get my book. I will get the book. I gotta show this to you.
Okay. Let me see.
Okay, so
there's a way for me to make your image larger.
It's not going to be very clear unless I do this, I think. But let me see if I can find here. Oh, here we go. There's the pucker mark. That's the dark side of the moon. That's what the pucker mark looks like on the backside of the moon. All of the spheroid objects, like Iapetus, Titan, they all have these pucker marks. Here's an artist representation of what the vehicle on this side looks like as it's disconnecting the object. This is a rendering or a model that Norman Berggren's team made at NASA. And so you see that on each one of these objects, they've got these pucker marks where it was detached from this like really, really weird insectoid looking vehicle. They speculate on how it's made.
Tom has a good question. He said, if we've been to the moon, why don't we have a real picture of Earth, not a composite one?
I don't think the photos can expose up there. The Van Allen belts would tear apart any filming that you could do up there. Even to this day, I don't know if you would be able to catalog anything from your journey while you were exposed to all of that radiation, unless there's really some specialized equipment that I don't know about,
right?
Which is always possible because there's.
And wouldn't it also destroy the humans?
Yeah, not necessarily. Not necessarily. If you could probably get some shielding and things. I've speculated on also how much advanced technology they even had in Nazi Germany, because they created electromagnetic fields that, Rudolf Hess, who was Hitler's number 2, led expeditions all over the world to go to all of the ancient Atlantic sites. And the main thing that they discovered was technology and the blueprints to recreate said technology. the 1952 flyover on the White House, an Admiral Byrd's expedition down to Antarctica to go face off against them, and they were met with flying saucers, and they couldn't hit them with traditional ammunition. I think using the new gravitics, or the new energy tech, I think it's possible. I think we had access to it back then too. I think we just didn't have it.
Things that we aren't aware of now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
What's under the desert? What's Area 51 been hiding? I mean, my dad classically, my dad worked for Boeing for almost 50 years. And he told me that in 1983, I think it was, he went to an unveiling of the SR-71 Blackbird at the Nevada facility that they flew all the engineers down to. They had all the talented and up-and-coming engineers who were going to be valuable to the company of this big unveiling. And they unveiled the SR-71 Blackbird. It was this Marvel Mach 4. And they're, holy shit. And everybody's pretty impressed. But my dad and his friends all keyed in on, when they were presenting it, the main guy was like, yeah, this is all great technology, but this is it's been around. We built our first SR-71 Blackbird back in 1954. So my dad was like, what? And everybody's looking at each other. 1954, that's 30 years ago. What the hell do they have now?
Why are they just showing this to us?
So it was always like it was always this joke. My dad actually showed me how the B-2 bomber operates without traditional conventional fuel. It has traditional turbine engines for takeoff, especially in like air shows and public airports and things where people might see the B-2 bomber take off. It has the traditional propulsion system that you might find in a typical jet engine or something. But once it gets to altitude, the reason why it can fly stealth, one of the reasons, including its shield, it's the material it's made out of and all that. But the engines on either side of the cockpit, you've got these two intakes. You've got these, first of all, you know what it looks like, right? It's a big flat triangular thing, and it looks exactly like a hawk from the side. The side profile of a B-2 is identical to a hawk from nature, and it terminates in this point right at the nose edge of the cockpit. Well, the reason why it's flattened like this is there's this special material that it's coated on. I forget what the material is, but it's coated on the front edge of that kind of like blade, or the front of the blade, as I'll call it. And it splits the air. And that material ionizes the air into either positive on the top and negative on the bottom, or negative on the top and positive on the bottom. I forget. But it ionizes the air, and it separates the positive ions from the negative ions, and the positive will go across the top of the aircraft and the negative across the lower. And those ions are then fed into these intakes that are along the side of the cockpit. And something happens in those motors that spins them around, and it's a free
like a magnetic effect, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a free energy engine without a force field or anything, but it effectively allows the craft to fly without fuel. So It's not like we haven't had tech like that even right under our noses for forever. It's all real interesting. Like, so the what craft we may have gotten to the moon in, definitely not the lunar landers, definitely not rockets, definitely not space shuttles, but something, right? What craft they did get there in, speculatively, I couldn't tell you. Maybe the TR-13B, right? The triangular thing that everybody seems to speculate on. But either way, the thread I was getting on, right, the moon, Saturn. There's this thing that Rudolf Steiner, this mystic who was into a lot of the ancient Kabbalistic teachings. He was a protege of Helena Blavatsky, and he created what's called the Waldorf School. It's one of the coolest, probably one of the best ways to rear a child. with a reverence for what they're studying and all this stuff. But he also gave lectures, innately deep lectures on what he called the eighth sphere. He was a very psychically in tune dude. He could kind of visualize that Earth is in this weird bubble. He can't quite describe it, but we ourselves seem to be out of phase in what he called the eighth sphere. He drew in his lectures all of the planets, and these were the spheres of influence in our solar system. The sun was at the heart of it, but you had the first sphere like Mercury, and then Venus, and then it didn't follow. It's not like Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. It doesn't follow this the sequence that you get from inner to outer. So it's not like Mercury is number 1, Venus is number 2, Earth is number 3. I think Earth is number. Let me look it up just a second. I can send you the link so you can pull it up for the audience. Dun, dun, dun. Here we go. And I'm going to put it in your chat. Here we go. There you go.
Got it.
Yeah, Earth is number 4. I was correct. So scroll down just a little bit. See how it's lecture V too? Oh, the V-Steg's right in the lecture. Yeah. So scroll down and you'll have an illustration. You'll see an illustration here. There it is. Okay. So essentially Saturn being number 1, Sun number 2, Moon number 3. Interesting, right? Like, these aren't even planets other than Saturn. So Saturn at the heart of it, as number 1, is this sequence of changes of events. He ties all the planets together into like this this progression system. So he's like, Saturn is the most manipulatively dense and material, and then the sun gives it visibility to be that way, and then the moon comes in and attenuates this. And it's like, what is it? He's like talking about how these things are almost like objects in a system of frequency manipulation or something, right? And that's always what it kind of seemed like to me. But he said when you get to the Earth, there's this haze that's over the top of the Earth. And it's like it prevents him from seeing beyond it too much. It's like this time warp, right? There's back to the time warp, back to the shield being out of phase. That's what I think this eighth sphere is it's this thing he identified as a bubble that's around us. You know how Alex Jones channel, it wasn't always InfoWars, it used to be called Prison Planet?
No, I didn't know that.
Remember that? His original show was Prison Planet TV.
So is that like the Back to the Future thing? Does that play into Back to the Future?
Yeah, 8 is the number of time.
Well, 88 miles per hour.
88 miles per hour. It's also the orbital pattern. I think it's called it's not the apophelion. The apophelion is the apex of the orbital pattern, but the name of this is escaping me, but the concept is thus: if you're to stand in the same spot and look and chart the sun every day throughout the course of the year, it makes a figure 8 pattern.
Right.
And the same thing with the moon. So the sun,
which is infinity.
Yes. Yes. Time, infinity. Yes, you're getting it. So that's that's 8 is steganography itself for time. It's a conveyance mechanism of time. So I don't think that there's any mistake that Rudolf Steiner identifying the 8th sphere is potentially like this bubble that is a time warp, a very sophisticated Kozyrev mirror or something, right? And what I've speculated is that the rings that the ring makers of Saturn, whoever they may be, created were frequency devices, or a big frequency device using the moon as an attenuator.
Interesting.
Saturn has 143 moons, Lisa. 143 moons. It's got it's got like an order of magnitude more moons than anything else. Like, because Jupiter, I think, what is it, 14 or 16? Think about all of the vehicles that supposedly may have made all of these different moons and the purpose of replacing them there and da 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 da. There's another thing I can send you here that kind of ties this together. Let me see here. Frequency of Saturn. And this is funny that, because I think it's even a NASA website.
Oh Lord.
Frequency.
Do you see the guy calling for the investigation into NASA's $1 billion spending?
No.
He, another guy drowned or almost drowned in his helmet last year.
Drowned in his helmet?
Mm-hmm. So 10 years ago, someone drowned in their helmet. Which, how do you do that unless you're underwater?
Well, here's what I don't know. I don't know what the interstellar medium ultimately is made out of. Right. But I do subscribe to the fact that the sun is probably creating a vacuum through it. Not right, all.
So how could there be water in a vacuum?
But, yeah, I don't know. Bubbles. Well, can you get the same effect of drowning from means other than water? Would be my next question. I don't know the answer to that, but that would be something to look at, right? Yeah. But either way, here are the rings of Saturn. When you actually look at the rings of Saturn, they are very, very precisely created rings, and they all make musical chords. Perfect musical chords. So this is what led me. If you strum them like a G like chord, a guitar, it create. Do you remember the when you go to watch a George Lucas film, the THX, the audience is listening, goes.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's the sound Saturn makes when you strum the rings.
Oh my goodness.
Well, hypothetically, I think you can scroll down in this page and there's a little video that you can pull up that suggests this. Well, that approximates it, not it suggests and approximates it. Right here. No, that's another photo. Keep going. It'll be a YouTube play button. There it is. The other thing, you'll find the intervals that the moon's orbit are very precise. So hit pause for a second. I'm going to explain what's happening. There's a tone that's playing for each individual moon that you see orbiting there. We're looking at Saturn from a bird's eye view. The moons are orbiting in a counterclockwise pattern, as you can see, and they're adding them in sequence. So they're adding one moon at a time, and you're hearing a tone every time the moon reaches 3 o'clock. So straight across, draw a line to the straight across on a right radial from the center of the hex on top of Saturn, and every time one of those moons hits that point, it's playing that sound. Okay. That's that sound that you're hearing. And it's going to strum the strings. So now zooming into the rings. Whatever's happening within its environment, it has a polar region that's in the shape of a hexagon. It's a vortex that's shaped like a hexagon. Have you ever seen it?
No, what this makes me think of, and if this is a distraction or not where you're going, tell me or redirect me. I just saw a thing where like they destroyed all the bells
Yeah.
and you know, the healing frequencies, and if you ring a bell over a crying baby, it like makes the baby stop crying, and part of the Liberty Bell being broken or something.
Yeah,
And
it's all the frequency to break. I think there's a lot of deep trauma, I guess is probably the right word, that we have from having been manipulated with frequencies unknowingly. I mean, think about the implications of if my speculations are even close to correct. If Saturn is a manipulation device that was built, which it certainly looks like it, at least the rings were built, that create a literal hex. Think about what a hex is. Like the hexagon on the top isn't a mistake, I don't think, to me. And it's broadcasting toward us at any given time. Maybe it interoperates with the moon, maybe not.
Is that why Trump talks about creating an Iron Dome over
us? I don't know. I don't actually know, because the Iron Dome's bullshit anyway. It's a big fireworks display. The Iron Dome doesn't actually exist.
It's not really a dome. It's a projectile.
It's fireworks. It's like, oh, we need to.
But what if it's not? Maybe that's a word salad thing that he's using that.
Well, I don't know why he's using it. I'm just saying what Iron Dome over Israel really is.
What it is, yeah.
If he's saying it at all, he might be pointing at the bullshit nature of it, because that's how, you always have to look at that Q doublespeak stuff.
Yeah.
So, and I haven't looked into it enough to really have a great opinion on it, but could be something.
Well, I just was watching that bell thing, the bell that you were showing on the moon, on the Saturn thing, and it made me think of that. I was seeing all these stories about these bells being destroyed, and I can't remember who ordered all these bells destroyed. And
well, think about how you might be able to neutralize it, right? If it really is frequency that we're being beamed at, and we're all in this, let's say the entire Earth is in this big 8th sphere time warp, right? And maybe our minds are slightly out of phase with the outside environment in space. Just like that shield technology from Dune. What if our minds are captured inside this 8th sphere created with Saturn? Remember Saturn V rocket, Saturn V2 rockets. Saturn and mind control and V-steganography go hand in hand. All of it. It's all there. It's all very, very keen on the tapestry of what's being shown through this ancient mystic system, it seems. So I don't know how to ascribe certainty to it, because how can you? It's just it's what the research leads you to kind of put the puzzle pieces together to consider and speculate further on until we can, right? I haven't ruled it out. Everything I look into only confirms it more and more and more. This hypothesis of mine that I have that Saturn and the moon play a big role in what we're living through. And then you have to speculate on who the hell built it. And do the Elohim come into this? The ships themselves, you saw the pictures, right? They're very they've got like mandibles and stuff on them. Here, like I'll show you the artist representation from Norman Bergren's team. Here you go. This is what this is like what they drew. You see how it almost that's right here is where the little pucker mark where the planet was being spit out was.
But you show us the other page more. You're kind of showing us the other page.
What's that?
You're kind of showing us the other page more.
Oh, this one.
Yes, this one. There. Yeah.
So do you see almost how insectoid it looks? It looks
very much. Yeah. Go down a little bit. Yeah.
I'm going to show you the other picture of it again, the side profile with it puckering the moon, or puckering a moon-like object, or creating a moon-like object. So everybody's got that reference point. I should have had. We should do these shows more often where I can get the material in advance.
Yeah. I can pretty much do this every other Wednesday.
Oh, you want to do a standing Wednesday show?
I pretty much can do it every other Wednesday now. I've got my schedule pretty
cool. Okay, here I found it again. Okay.
And now that you're
here's the side profile again of what it would look like.
Yeah, that's good.
But Cliff has even talked about in his psychedelic journeys, penetrating time. That's what he's doing. I speculate when he's getting into that psychedelic realm is he's breaking the barriers of what time constraints have. And he finds these mantis creatures.
Yes, he's talked about
right. And to me, these would almost look like what the mantis would fly around or build, maybe, right? Here's how big they are too. So if you're looking at a top-down view of Saturn, this is what the ship would look like. That's how big it is. It's as big as the entire width of the ring system. And you've got another vehicle here. They identified about a dozen of these vehicles that were flying around. I want to show you also the part of Saturn. I mentioned the ring wasn't complete, right? There's a photo right there of the incomplete part of Saturn. This gape right here, right there, is the incomplete part of the ring. It wasn't yet complete. So this is top-down illustration.
Oh, I see.
Of what it looks like. You see on the very bottom how it's flat.
Yeah.
So the vehicles hadn't finished whatever the project was back in 1972 when they flew the Voyager craft past these. But so, back to the V-Steg of the November 5th. And right. So if by the way, my new speculation before we get too far off the topic of Mantis and Elohim, you saw the Mantis representation at the closing ceremony, perhaps, of the Olympics. Did you see that?
I did not watch much of that.
Well, there was a very clear representation of like a mantis being that was subjugating people at the closing ceremony of the Olympics. And here's my thought, right? So here's my wild speculation. What if the Elohim, because Cliff has talked about them being able to cast things using their mind and affect us in really strong ways, right? It's what he's translated from the ancient Pali and the ancient Sanskrit and stuff that he and his old farts group that he says is looking into. And they're able, these Elohim are able to manipulate us so much psychically that they can poke a hole in our face, right? They point at us and we're dead. But they can also shield themselves. They can also put themselves, he's even said this, the cloaking technology that they can use puts you out of phase of time. So what I'm wondering is if the Elohim themselves, and how Ezekiel describes them, how Isaiah describes them, these resplendent beings, the most charismatic type of being that you can possibly cast eyes upon, at least as a human. You look at them and you're like, wow, what a resplendent being. What I'm wondering is if it's not the mantis creatures themselves creating that image so that we see something that is appealing to us, lest we not kill them on sight. You know, like if you see a big bug walking your way, would you even try to trust it?
Of course not.
Or would you necessarily have to interface, if you are that bug and you wish to subjugate this population, would you have to make yourself look more appealing to the people that you are trying to capture the minds of, right? So what I'm getting at is, and what I'm wondering is are the Elohim actually just the mantis? And the Elohim that we think are these angelic types, it's just a mind spell that they've cast on us to be more charismatic so that they can interface with us over time.
For us to see them as the gods.
Just to see them as that, right? Yeah. Lest we think they're evil right out of the gate and kill them on sight, right? So, because all of this plays in, the insectoid nature of what those vehicles look like, the mind control, the very sophisticated psychic technology that Cliff describes in the psychedelic realm when he goes and interfaces with them, the abilities that it seems the ancient texts ascribe them to have, Are we just dealing with the mantis? I don't know.
Well, I had wondered, when he talked about when his dad was in the military and they had the red night goggles.
Yeah.
And that whole episode of, he got an award or whatever for saving his crew because the kids were seeing demons with the red goggles, and they were shooting because they're so scared out of their mind.
They're shooting the tails off of other Hueys and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they were seeing the demons flying and stuff. And so I was like, well, in the Bible, when they talk about angels and demons, are those what, is the word alien interchangeable with demon or angel?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know specifically. That'd be a really good inquiry to look at the translation.
Is it just like,
we have to go back to the original Greek, obviously, to really figure it out. And I don't know how to read ancient Greek, unfortunately. I have to use codexes just to translate myself.
Interesting.
Excuse me. But anyway, so that's like, the grandiose top. There's so much to talk about. I'm really, really truncating it. And I'm sorry if this is over.
No, I think it's really interesting.
Lost. This is what my work is based in, right? Like I've cataloged so much of this speculation. It's all speculation. I don't ascribe any of this to be 100% accurate with the truth. That's not what I'm doing here. But what I am saying is I use parsimony, Occam's razor, to try to disprove it. That's the nature of my research, because Occam's razor states it's pretty accurate, right? Devoid of any other logical possibility. If it quacks like a duck, sounds like a duck, or looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, feels like a duck, whatever the saying is, right? Then it is a duck. It has to be, right? And it seems to be what this continues to convey. I have yet to really come across anything that I'm trying to use to disprove the theory that doesn't just prove it further, right? So people smarter than me need to start chiming in that know dynamics of how the mind actually functions at that frequency level in order to tell me if I'm just too far out on that limb or not. But I do know that the technology of mind control is there, and the V-Steg conveys it. That's as much as I do know.
I think it's very interesting. Well, let's do this again in a couple weeks. Are we going to be past 9/11 on that couple weeks?
In a couple weeks, yeah. 1 week from now is 9/11.
Oh, next week is 9/11. Okay. So we'll meet back again on the 18th would be our opportunity to meet back. So quickly before we go, do you see any V-Steg around 9/11 other than you said the Road to Ruta stuff? Any other little quick
well yes, it all factors into the Reagan administration and the Star Wars program, and think about the tech that took out the towers. It wasn't planes, it was space technology. They were dismantled by cold fusion. Have you ever read Judy Wood's book? Where did the Twin Towers go? Just a sec. This book right here. Where did the towers go? Judy Wood.
Does it talk about all three?
Missing. Nobody knows where Judy Wood is. She is missing. She's been missing for several years, since like 2022, early 2022 was the last time she gave an interview. And she, well, here's the curious thing. You'll never look at the Twin Towers the same again when you look at them collapse. When you start to see them peeling apart like a banana, and go watch videos after this. I implore you to do it and watch the big ass pieces from the top of the building as it's peeling like a banana, right? When the towers are collapsing, it's a really odd looking thing. And it looks like that. And it looks like a banana peel because as these big blocks of steel and cement and everything the building is made of are falling to the ground, they're shrinking like ice cubes. It's almost like if you were to super heat up an ice cube and shrink it, you'd see it literally shrink right before your eyes.
Interesting.
That's what these big, so, and it was the number one thing that was enigmatic to me when I was watching this stuff live in 9th grade. I was really skeptical from the get-go, but everybody below that was interviewed that was just a civilian that was like hiding in a coffee shop or whatever, they were just ducking into anything they could find once the building started to fall. Almost everybody was surprised they were still alive because they thought a building was coming down on top of them.
Right.
But a building did not come down on top of them. A bunch of dust came down on top of them.
Right.
The building was vaporized.
2 buildings came down.
Yeah, and they were vaporized into nothing.
Yes.
But we still found passports and stuff. Those survived, of course.
Yeah.
The identifying marks. Not a single telephone, not a single chair, not a single filing cabinet, nothing. Yes. There was nothing left. Oh, but it was just hyperheated, right? So there's a technology that's up there that is part of this network, the Jewish space lasers, right? Like it's all part of the, wow. It's all part of the, it's all part of the system. And we don't, we're going to talk further. That's why I'm trying to, like, terminating the idea right there. Cause I know you're trying to wrap this up.
No. We'll do this again.
Yes.
And we will do this on a more regular basis. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I certainly did. And I love having these critical thinking conversations, opening your mind, thinking about things in other ways, seeing the things that are just right out there, that they're putting this all in our face. And we need to all wake up and start having conversations about it. So thank you so much for joining us. Tell everybody where they can follow your work and where they can find you.
Everybody can find my previous work. I'm not contributing these 3-hour. I do these 3-hour-long presentations on using V-Steganography to decode the culture as it's happening in front of us. But I've sunset that effort now, and I'm developing something else. I told you a little bit about it before we got on. Yeah. And you can't find me there yet because we haven't built that yet. But you can go to my Rumble channel, which is just Skullcap Savant. Here, I'll give you the link so people can go here. Because what I do recommend people do if they're interested in this is,
I have a link in the description where they can find you.
Okay.
Of this channel.
The Rumble one is where people should go, and not the YouTube one, though, in my opinion, because it's a more comprehensive catalog. YouTube starts to, they remove my videos periodically. And I got to go edit them, and I stopped.
I will make sure that's what I put in my description for you as well.
But it's a tapestry of information. It goes, if you watch it all the way through, all the videos I've done, it'll probably take you 10 days or more, because I do 3-hour-long presentations and go through all this stuff. But you can truly get an understanding.
There's some really cool ones. Like, watch this one, Wishes and Rainbows. Watch the ones with the bridges that lead out of Oz. There's some really interesting ones. I really enjoy them, and I think you will too. So make sure to check that out. And I will change the description, or make sure that I put the Rumble link in the description of this video if you're watching this later. So.
Yeah. Give a shout out to Josh on the Wishes and Rainbows video. That's who I did that one with. I was trying to teach him these concepts. Exactly. What's funny is Bix wouldn't do the interview after a while, and so Josh was like, "We have to do it," and Bix was like, "No, I'm just not going to do it." And so Josh did it, and then Bix calls after, and he's like, "I still don't get it. I'm not going to do this chat." So we still got to get Bix into this conversation, because it factors in like a glove to the Oz and the Wishes and Rainbows comic.
I love it all.
He's on his solar power journey right now. So he is talking about the solar panels. He's chasing those solar panels. Exactly. He's a good guy. Oh, I love him. He's awesome.
Who doesn't? All right. Well, you guys take care. Thanks for joining us, and check all those links out. We appreciate you guys watching. Take care. Bye.
Bye, guys.